You know, sometimes all it takes is one question. Just one question from a journalist to a politician, and suddenly the curtain gets pulled back on a much, much deeper problem. We're talking about a problem of life, death, and who's actually held accountable.
And then sometimes the answer you get is this. Kya ghanta ho gaya? Now, that roughly translates to what the hell happened? Or maybe even more dismissively, so what? Yeah, that was the actual viral response from a government minister when he was asked about a terrible tragedy. So the big question is, right, how does a public servant, someone who's supposed to work for the people, respond to a tragedy with such contempt? That's exactly what we're going to unpack here, digging into all the details that came out of this pretty shocking incident.
Okay, so first, let's set the scene of this confrontation. On one side, you've got a journalist, Anurag Dori, who was just doing his job, asking a tough but necessary question. And on the other side, the Madhya Pradesh Urban Development Minister, a man named Kailash Vijayavargiya.
And the question he asked was tragically simple. He asked the minister about the deaths of at least 10 people. The cause? Contaminated drinking water. Now, here's the kicker. This didn't happen in just any city. This was Indore, a place that's been celebrated all over India, winning the Cleanest City Award not once, not twice, but 7 times.
So, to really get why that minister's response was so callous, we need to rewind. We have to go back and understand the sheer horror that led to the question in the first place. We've got to talk about what happened to the water in Indore.
And this is where you see the brutal contrast, right? The official story, the one they tell everyone, is that Indore is India's cleanest city, a model for everyone else to follow. But the reality for thousands of people living there, deadly water, and a complete, catastrophic failure of infrastructure.
So, you have to be asking, how on earth did this happen? Well, the reports lay out this horrifyingly simple chain of events. It starts with a drinking water pipe getting a leak. Okay, that can happen. But then, a new toilet gets built right on top of it. A toilet with no proper septic tank. So you can imagine what happens next. Human waste from the toilet pit starts seeping directly into the drinking water pipe. The result? It was basically poison, flowing straight into people's homes through their tap.
And this is the immediate, terrible human cost. We're talking about at least 10 people who lost their lives, including a 6-month-old baby. Think about that. Healthy adults, people who'd maybe never been sick a day in their lives, were suddenly just gone. And the scale of this crisis is just immense. It wasn't just the 10 confirmed deaths. Over 15,000 people got sick. We're talking severe diarrhea, all sorts of horrible waterborne diseases. The entire local health system was completely overwhelmed.
And you know what's maybe the most infuriating part of this whole thing? This wasn't some sudden, out-of-the-blue disaster. Nope. According to the reports, residents had been complaining for months. They were protesting about foul-smelling, dirty water coming out of their taps. And what happened? Their complaints were ignored. No action was taken. Not until it was far, far too late.
Which brings us right back to that moment. The journalist's question and the minister's now infamous reply. And you can bet, as soon as that video clip hit the internet, the political damage control machine kicked into absolute overdrive.
Just look at the timeline. It shows you just how fast everything unraveled. The video goes viral. Just a few hours later, the minister is on Twitter, posting an apology, claiming he was stressed out and hadn't slept. Then, almost immediately, 2 lower-level city officials get suspended. A classic case of finding scapegoats, right? And all of this is happening as the story just explodes into a national headline.
But look, this story isn't just about one minister having a bad day, or even just one leaky pipe. The sources point to something much deeper, a kind of sickness in the system itself. So, what are these systemic failures everyone's talking about?
Well, it seems like a few different things created this perfect storm. First, you've got a single political party that's been in control of the city for 25 years. That can lead to a certain complacency. Then, like we already talked about, you have citizen complaints just being flat out ignored. On top of that, the opposition is now claiming the government is actually hiding the true death toll. And finally, there's the media's role. In a climate where a lot of media avoids the tough questions, a journalist just doing their job suddenly looks like an act of rebellion.
And what about the minister himself? The source material suggests this isn't exactly a one-off. It points to a pattern of controversy. Things like dehumanizing comments about women's clothing, victim-blaming Australian cricketers after a molestation incident, and even the case of his own son, who was famously filmed assaulting a city official with a cricket bat and was later acquitted. So,
where does all this leave us? I mean, after the apologies are made and a couple of officials are suspended, what's the real lesson here? What's the takeaway from the tragedy in Indore?
I think this quote, which reportedly came from a citizen on the ground, just captures the raw public anger and this feeling of being worthless. They said, for politicians, we are equivalent to cockroaches. Just, wow, what a devastating way to summarize that feeling that ordinary people's lives are seen as disposable.
And ultimately, this seems to be the conclusion drawn from the reporting. In a system where accountability seems to be missing, the responsibility, well, it falls back on the people. Without citizens who are paying attention, who ask the tough questions and demand real answers, basic, fundamental rights, like the right to clean, safe drinking water, they'll just keep getting ignored.
And that leaves us with one last, really critical question to think about. We hear so much about development, right? About building a modern nation. But what does any of that truly mean if the most basic building blocks of life, clean air to breathe and safe water to drink, aren't even guaranteed? That's the heavy question the situation in Indore forces all of us to ask.